Hello everyone. Welcome to the Peat Fest session on managing peatland forests sustainably in Malaysia. I'm Faizal from the Global Environmental Centre, and I'll be presenting today. Global Environment Centre is a Malaysian non-profit organization. We were established in 1998, so 21 years ago. We're based in Selangor, Malaysia, and we're working in all of the ASEAN member states and at international level. And we have a number of programs on river forest management, and one of our large programs is on peatland management, particularly working with all the Southeast Asian nations. So one of our ongoing peatland programs is supported by RE-PEAT under the Sustainable Management of Peatland Ecosystems in Malaysia. And let me just give you a little bit of background on peatland ecosystems in Malaysia. Altogether, we have about 2.5 million hectares of peatlands, which all used to be peat swamp forest, but now maybe only 30% of the forests are left, and even those are somewhat impacted. So this is how a peat swamp forest in Malaysia looks like. So it is covered with a high forest, a diverse tree species. And peatlands are very critical for water storage and water supply and flood control in Southeast Asia. We have very high rainfall, and the peat stores the water and then releases it gradually in the dry season. So peatlands are also critical for regulation, and peatlands globally are the most important ecosystem for climate regulation, storing more than any other terrestrial ecosystem, and twice as much carbon as that stored in the forest biomass of all forest ecosystems. So in Southeast Asia, peatlands have very high stores, but when degraded, they can release the stored carbon. So in Southeast Asia, we have about 60 billion tons of stored carbon in the peatlands, but our emissions due to degradation and fires is between 1 to 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide. So it's about half of the global peatland emission is coming from the region's peatlands. That is Indonesia and Malaysia mainly. So peatlands in Malaysia have very high biodiversity, a very broad range of plant and animal species, including many those that are endemic to particular sites. So the peatlands are also important for feeding local community, support to local livelihoods. In the presentation today, I'm going to focus on two specific sites, two case studies. Firstly, North Selangor Peat Swamp Forest. This is just to the northwest of Malaysia's capital in Kuala Lumpur, and covers an area of 81,000 hectares of peatlands. That's the size of Singapore Island. So it's quite a significant peatland area. And it's still forested, and it's one of, we believe it's the largest contiguous forested peatland we have remaining in Peninsular Malaysia. Others are more fragmented and divided, so it is in one contiguous block. Although there have been various impacts over time, there has been large-scale logging and some degradation. So it is home to a wide variety of species of birds and mammals. These pictures are all from the site: tapir, panther, sun bear, and leopard cat at the site. And we also have extremely rare fish species. We have 124 species of fish recorded in North Selangor Peat Swamp Forest, of which 6 are endemic to the site and newly described in the last 20 to 30 years. So some very rare endangered species within this site. So one of the key elements of management has been the engagement of local communities. In particular, 4 villages around the southern portion of the forest have come together to create a small community-based organization, Friends of North Selangor Peat Swamp Forest. And they're involved in a broad range of activities from conservation, fire prevention, education and awareness, and ecotourism within the area. So this is a satellite image showing the forest, and you can see that there are some portion highlighted in red circle, which have been significantly degraded. This is as a result of large-scale logging or efforts at land conversion for agriculture or plantation, which have led to large-scale fires, which have degraded the forest area. Here's just some example of fires which have been burning. And previously, fires used to burn very regularly in the area. All of the fires are man-made fires related to land clearing, land development in and adjacent to the forest, as well as fires started by those who are hunting or fishing. But in recent years, it's been possible to bring the fires under control and to prevent fires primarily through the active engagement of local community and also adjacent landowners. One of our key aspects of the rehabilitation has been to, as far as possible, use natural regeneration or ecological restoration approaches. Here's an example. You can see on the left of the slide an area which was being cleared illegally for development of oil palm in 2012, where the people involved set the forest alight and 400 hectares were burnt and destroyed in a week with that fire. What we did in this case was not to plant any trees, but we restored higher natural water levels. You can see the canal. This was an ex-logging canal from the 1980s, which was not blocked up. And as a result, the forest was drained and easy and prone to fire. What we have done is put a large-scale block in, and you can see on the right-hand picture what happened 6 years later in 2018. You can see that the large portion of the forest has recovered, and there have been no fires at this site for the last 8 years, since 2012, and there is ongoing good recovery of the forest, which was degraded by raising water tables. Here are other measures which are undertaken by GEC in partnership with local community, the local government and other partners. So we are blocking drainage canals, both small and large canals. In some area which was impacted by adjacent mining, we have constructed clay dikes, so which put a clay layer right down to the base of the peat and maintain high water table in the peat, irrespective of water table outside. And then we're doing daily monitoring and patrolling with local communities and setting fire danger rating based on meteorological predictions and weather records for the previous days and weeks. We are able to set a fire risk for the site, and then the local team go and set the warning boards throughout the site. We're also regularly monitoring the water levels through a network of piezometers. We have about 100 piezometers in different parts of the site, so we can detect reduced water levels and increased fire risk. In those areas which have dried out, we have some measures for increasing water levels. In the area near the mining, as I mentioned, there is a clay dike which raises the water level and stops drainage. We also have a 3-kilometer pipeline system where we can pump water from adjacent mining ponds and raise the water level in significant portion of fire-prone forests. You can see on the top right the water pump in operation. We have also trained teams of local community in being first responders in fire prevention and firefighting in case fires occur, and to quickly put in place measures which will raise water levels, such as small sandbag dams in drainage canals. We have a large program of active replanting or rehabilitation. This has involved growing 150,000 tree saplings produced by the local community in community nurseries. We can see in the pictures here. And more than 200 canals have been blocked, and 25,000 volunteers have been involved in replanting and rehabilitating 323 hectares, and also preventing fires over a much larger area of 20,000 hectares. So here just some changes. You can see in the top left one portion of the forest reserve adjacent to a plantation with low water level as a result of drainage from the plantation in 2013. And the bottom right, you can see the same site 6 years later with tall trees which have grown up as a result of high water table and transplanting of the seedlings from the community nursery. Here we can see some of the tree planting, community tree planting, and with external public volunteers in the site. In order to give additional incentive to the local community to maintain intact peat swamp forest, so in areas and villages where we have prevented fire and the forest has recovered or natural forest remains, we have supported ecotourism and handicraft activity. And I think each year we get 10 to 20,000 visitors to these areas, which bring significant income to the local community and act as a further incentive to prevent, to encourage community action to protect the forest. We have also done extensive programs through the schools, in 6 secondary schools and 15 primary schools, where we have engaged many people, and we have active of getting media coverage in national and local papers. The portion of the site has been recognized under a Commonwealth initiative called the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy, which is a global partnership to recognize forest areas which have been multi-stakeholder engagement and protection and management, and this was recognized in 2017. The second case study I'd like to describe is in Southeast Pahang, peatland landscape. This is on the east coast of Peninsular Malaysia. As we can see in the satellite image, there is a core area of forest. These forests cover collectively 105,000 hectares of forest, but they're divided, as you can see, along river corridors by non-forest areas. Altogether, it sits on a landscape of 230,000 hectares, primarily peatlands, with the balance being mainly plantations for oil palm and other land development. So this is the photo of the site in September 2018, when there was extensive fire. And throughout the peat swamp forest, before we initiated the program, there were more than 10,000 hectares which were regularly having fire, primarily as a result of drainage for plantations and for log extraction. So we're focusing on one area on the west side of the forest, and you can see a large fire scar extending from adjacent to plantations into the forest reserve, the forest being the dark green. In this area, there are a significant number of indigenous tribal communities living, what we call Orang Asli, or original people in Malaysia. They're living in the area in between the plantation and the forest. And historically, they have depended almost fully on the forest for the resources for food and shelter and living. But now they are more cut off from the forest as the forest has been cleared and degraded. So here's a snapshot of one of the areas where you can see plantation, the indigenous village where historically they have grown rubber on mineral soil, and the degraded peatlands which has been drained. You can see the canal there and regularly burnt to give grassland. So the root causes are canals and drains cut for logging, log extraction, and also for drainage of plantation. leaves a large area of drained peatlands, which is prone to fire. And then these are burning maybe every 3 to 6 months for the last 5 to 10 years. So destroying the forest, which was the basic support for the indigenous communities. So we started a program by calling a range of stakeholders from plantation, from forestry department, from local government, from the indigenous communities, and from others to come with a plan to look at integrated management and fire prevention in this landscape. And for the Orang Asli communities, the indigenous communities, we went through a formal FPIC, free, prior and informed consent process, where we consulted in detail of what were the proposed activity and what are the implications, and got the written endorsement from the communities before we undertook work in their areas. So we had a very community based approach. You can see from the houses, the community are very poor, living in poor condition. They don't have electricity, they don't have water supply, the children don't go to school, they have very little source of income. And we have worked in a range of ways to improve the situation of community, and at the same time address the problem of fires, which are destroying the forest and also impacting community land. So we, together with different stakeholders, have put in, I believe, a total of 10 different canal blocks to block the drainage canals which will cut through the land. And we've been very successful in re-wetting. You can see on the bottom left, raising the water table significantly across a large area, about nearly 1,000 hectares of peatlands. The water table has been significantly raised, which has provided the right situation for recovery of natural peatland vegetation. So you can see on the left image of an area which was burnt in 2018, and on the right, after blocking of the drainage canals in the area, you can see the recovery, and you can see faint lines where the replanting has taken place of the forest trees, but other areas we're letting a natural regeneration take place. So here's satellite image showing the areas which have been re-wetted and also the canal blocks. So the canal blocks are only in a relatively small portion of the area, but this canal was draining a very large area, including in the forest, and the re-wetted area is very large with higher water table. In addition to natural regeneration, we have, as part of income generation for the community, established a small community nursery with a sapling buyback. So the community find the small wildings or small seedling of the trees. They may be in plantation areas around, or they may be in village areas. They transfer them to poly bags and keep in the nursery, and then we buy back from them and pay them for planting in the forest. So this gives a significant income source, a sustaining income source for community. And we're also looking at longer term of getting the government and other agencies to buy from the seedlings from the community, and so continue that income source for the community members. We have also looked to address the issue of the water supply. So we have installed 3 solar power water pumps, and the solar power system also provides lighting to the houses in sub villages. So this is a very successful and very significant improvement in water supply and the health and the living conditions of the local community. We've also introduced new livelihood options. On the top right is a clulet or stingless honeybee, which is now being cultivated in the village and sold outside. And also on the bottom left, you can see mushroom development. These mushrooms are grown actually on the waste from the oil palm mill. So in partnership with the oil palm mill, we have provided the organic waste from the mill, and then this is used for mushroom cultivation, which are then sold in supermarkets nationally. We also have help with handicraft, training on handicraft, and also in the bottom left, you can see fish culture in tanks, which are providing additional income and food to the community members. The community members are actively involved in the monitoring and the fire prevention through patrolling throughout the area. Overall, although it has been relatively recent, since 2018 we started that program, it's been very successful and has been recognized as a model for scaling up, and we'll be working in the next 4 years under the framework of a national plan. The national plan is Sustainable Management of Peatland Ecosystems in Malaysia. It's a national peatland project which will run from now till 2024, and that will work in both of the landscapes that I've mentioned, North Selangor peat swamp forest and Southeast Pahang, and scale up the community activity to cover all of the communities in the landscape and a broader area of the landscape. For these two landscapes also, we will be contributing to the process to review and upgrade integrated management plans for the site. So the experience from community-based protection and rehabilitation will become a core part of the future management plan and strategy for the area. And this will also contribute to the revision and upgrading of the National Action Plan on Peatlands, which is a national policy and action framework for peatlands, which runs till this year, and the process will start soon for the revision and extension till 2030 of the National Action Plan. The activities will also link to, drawing on and contributing to a number of regional strategies. The ASEAN Peatland Management Strategy is the umbrella framework for peatland management in the 10 ASEAN member states. And you can see on the cover of the report is a picture of North Selangor peat swamp forest. And this strategy has been developed in 2004-2006 with involvement of GEC and ASEAN member states, and is now in the process of review by GEC and extension till 2030 to provide a framework for action on peatlands in the region. And you can see on the bottom a roadmap on ASEAN cooperation towards transboundary haze pollution control, which is looking at how to prevent the recurring peatland fires and large-scale transboundary haze, which is of massive impact in this region. In the worst case, in 97-98, we had a smoke cloud covering 12 million square kilometers for 5 or 6 months and led to billions of damage. We have had similar large-scale events every 3 to 5 years linked to El Nino and other drought events. But the root cause is the degradation and opening up of peatland landscape. And collectively, this action in Malaysia, combined with action in Indonesia and elsewhere, is working to address the problem of transboundary haze. Finally, all of the activities being undertaken are contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals under the UN. Broad variety of benefits and contributions through this program. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge for Southeast Pahang peatland landscape a broad range of government agencies and international and national funders and local funders and the Orang Asli community, which are crucial to the success of this program. And for North Selangor peat swamp forest, similarly a broad range of government agencies, private sector, and universities and other contributors to the success of the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faizal. So we have some time to do some questions. So if anyone has any questions to ask, then now is the time. You can either put, there should be a little place where you put your hand up in the chat. Or you can also write your question into the chat directly. if no one has any questions, we can also continue the conversation on Mighty Network in the discussion section. So that's always an option if you don't have a question now, but then remember in a bit. Oh, Felicia raised hand. So
yeah, I'm just going to ask it here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Felicia. Thank you so much for a really interesting talk and for sharing these two very successful and important projects with us. I'm just wondering, did you face any sort of community pushback or any pushback from stakeholders, and if you wouldn't mind sharing them, how you overcome the pushback and resistance? Thank you.
We have recognized from the beginning the importance of active stakeholder engagement, and therefore we have from the very beginning been consulting and engaging with the community members. So I would not say in these two projects we have not had community pushback, but there has been a period of engagement and dialogue with the communities. So for example, in the Aboriginal or Orang Asli communities in Pahang, we had some uncertainty and initial, one could say, distrust of outsiders. This community has been very much abandoned by government agencies. Even though there is a government agency responsible for Orang Asli, the welfare of indigenous people, they have not undertook activities in this village for 5 or 6 years, because the government focus has been to move such villages to a relocation settlement where they will be put in concrete buildings, Western style housing, which is not in line with the cultural requirement, and also very hot and not good for living. And so many of the communities don't move, and then the government takes the attitude of then they will not help the communities. So that is why this community doesn't have any water or health or other support for many years. So they were initially very distrustful of outsiders. They had had some help from some church group or religious group, and they were a little suspicious at the beginning. But I think when they saw that we were sincere in wanting to help and undertake activities, then they became very open and supportive. For the North Selangor case, I would not say we had resistance, but maybe there were people saying, why do we need to do anything about the peat swamp forest? What's it to do with us? But there were core members within the village who were more familiar with the situation, and then they became the core partners to us. We wanted to work also with a range of villages, not just one village. So we worked initially with 4 villages, simultaneously getting their views. And then we tailored the opportunities for engagement differently to the different villages so that it would be suitable for their situation. So for the villages which were nearest to the more intact forest, then we looked at option of ecotourism as one of the ways the village could benefit from maintaining the forest. And in those areas where there were frequent fires, we looked at ways that the community could actively patrol and be engaged in the fire prevention. And those villages which had plantations, we worked with them to improve the water management in the plantation so that they would not have an impact on the adjacent area. So I would say that the good relationship and the fact that this NGO we helped established in 2012, the Friends of North Selangor Peat Swamp Forest, is still active in 2020, that's 8 years later, is a testament to the fact that we were able to build the right model of community engagement. I know that for other projects elsewhere, in Indonesia we have seen this experience as well, where it's more top-down and the government or others go in and say, block these canals, stop this activity. There may then be some resistance where local community might use the canal for transport, for access, where they may be going in and fishing and extracting from the area, or they may be involved in the logging, illegal logging of the area. Then there may be some resistance. But in the case in Malaysia, with these communities, I think because we tailored the approach to their needs, then we did not face any resistance, and it's led to long-term support, which is now held up even by the government. This is a model that they want to replicate elsewhere.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know that we've reached 6:46, but we do have some time in the schedule. So maybe for those of you who want to leave at this point, you can also ask questions in Mighty Network, but we can just also extend it longer for anyone who wants to ask questions now. I have one question from Anon, so I'll just read it. Most of the plans end this year. How do you rate their achievements? And is there a need for extensions?
Okay, so those are the national plans and the regional plans. So the ASEAN peatland management strategy from 2006 till 2020 has been a very key framework in bringing all of the 10 ASEAN member states into the same framework and looking together at peatland management issues. So I think that one of the key aspect of that has been that has been officially recognized and implemented through the ASEAN government mechanism. That's equivalent in Europe, like the European Union. So the ASEAN Secretariat has been the leader on that, and each year they convene a meeting of a task force on peatlands to look at the progress of implementation. And I think that from the review, which we're now doing the final review, that many of the initial objectives have been met, but there are still ongoing areas of challenge, and still for long-term sustainable management of peatlands, there needs a continuing framework. So there is agreement in principle to extend the framework up to 2030, and we're in the process of consulting with the government, albeit a little bit restricted by the COVID, but we hope that by end of this year, there will be agreement on moving forward, extending the plan to 2030, and we will finalize the plan sometime early next year. The National Action Plan in Malaysia is a derivative from the regional plan, so that will also be revised in line with the revision of the regional plan. So that will take place next year. So I think this is a very strong and useful mechanism of getting top-down to bottom-up engagement. So I think the fact that some of the plans are finishing this year is not a problem. It's now an opportunity to insert new and additional thinking in the revision of the plans.
Nice. We have one more question from Reg. Do you want to ask the question? Should I? I'll just ask it. Do you have issues on invasive alien species, and how do you manage them? How do you manage that? Are there any intervention to eradicate them?
I think we're quite lucky in the peat swamp forest system in this area that we have not had significant alien invasive species in the sites. Two of the species which are known from some other sites are water hyacinth and also the azolla or African water fern. And these do occur in degraded peatlands and can block ditches and canals, and can remove decomposition of them, can remove the oxygen from the system. Already in the peat swamp forest, there are sometimes low oxygen situation, and this exacerbates the situation. But we also have a number of fish species which are air breathing, fish species which come up to the surface to breathe, and therefore they're able to live in low oxygen conditions. But fortunately in these sites, we have not had this problem of alien invasives.
Nice. And there's one last question from Reza. Yeah. Great. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the issue about the water piping for re-wetting peat. So the particular area that we're focusing on is an area that was impacted by adjacent tin mining and sand mining So there was a very deep adjacent mining operation, which lowered the whole regional water level, including for several kilometers into the peat. So this portion of the peat swamp forest was always dry and was always burning. So we have done two measures. One is developing the clay dike, but that was very expensive and takes quite a long time to construct a clay dike along the boundary. So as a short-term measure, when we were faced by very significant fires, we developed this pipeline. This is using HDPE, high-density polypropylene pipe, and which is a flexible pipe which we installed for 3 kilometers from the mining pond into the center. And I think every 200 to 300 meters, we've installed an outlet. So with a large pump, we can pump the water in from the mining pond, and then we can release it at the appropriate outlet, depending where the water level is. We also have ability to attach a fire hose to the outlet, so then we can take this as a water supply for firefighting. So I think there have only been, since we've had the system installed, I think only 1 or 2 small fires since we've been able to raise the water level in this area. Compared to previously, almost every year there were significant fires. We're now in the process to complete the clay dike along the boundary, and that also is leading to a broader increase in the water level without the need for pumping in. But we have the pump now as a backup during drought periods.
Thank you, Faizal.
Thank you.
Thanks, Reza.
Thank you.
We'll be happy to visit the area.
There is one
Yes,
more question.
yes. We very much welcome anyone from the region or elsewhere who want to visit, or if anyone on the group want to see some publication or reports or others, we can send that. We are trying to set these sites up also as a demonstration and education sites, and the state government and national government have agreed with the proposal to have these as a living museum or virtual education areas. We have some education facility in North Selangor, and we'll be looking at some visitor facility at the other site. In fact, in the top right of my thank you slide is a small guest accommodation in the peat swamp forest in Southeast Pahang. Anyone want to come for fishing trip or visiting, that is available. There's also some floating hides, some floating accommodation in the peat you can see in the picture there. So we welcome anyone who would like to learn, and of course we can make more information available, videos, publications and others, management plans, for anyone who'd like to hear more about the area.
Just on that note, I was going to suggest that maybe you could send us this presentation and then we'll upload it to Mighty Network so everyone can, but more, any more documents that you have, and we can share them on Mighty Network.
I think presentation already shared yesterday, and the team will send some more references.
There's one more question, oh, 2 more questions. So from Dia, fires has not reoccurred in the restored areas. Are these mainly due to maintaining the water table, or were there other measures being undertaken? What were the most important factors in managing these restored areas?
I think water is, in peat swamp forest, water is the most critical issue. So if you restore the area, but you don't maintain the high natural water level, then the chances of fire are going to come there or come there again. But also, it's, if you can raise the water level and still have a grass-like area or swampy area, this will still have vulnerability to fire. So our ultimate target is to get forest cover. When we get forest cover, and the peatlands are naturally forested, so we want the forest cover under the canopy, then the humidity level is high even during dry periods. And then you're not getting the wind blowing across the area and drying it out. So the combination of high groundwater level and then good or dense vegetation are the two factors that can prevent fire burning in the systems. But also critical is to stop people deliberately starting fire. And these fires inside the forest are started often by those who are fishing or hunting, and outside the forest, mainly those who are clearing land or trying to dispose of waste. So we have programs to work on those different target groups, those who may be fishing or hunting, and those who have adjacent land, to prevent fire in those areas. Even though in Malaysia as well as Indonesia, it's not legally possible for people to burn, but this still frequently happens. And we have programs showing demonstrating alternative way of land clearing without burning, and ways in which they can generate income without the use of fire. As you saw in our Aboriginal community, we're looking at bee cultivation. So when you have bees, you do not want smoke, because the smoke or fire will be very negative for the quality of the honey. So if we're encouraging communities to have beehives, then they will be actively preventing any fire, because it will affect the quality of the product. So in the same way, we're encouraging communities to have tree crops and not annual crops like corn or maize, where they want to burn every year or clear the vegetation every year. We want them to have tree crops which are suitable for wetted or re-wetted peatlands. This is part of the strategy.
There's one more question. Oh no, I think people are more.
There's a request for helping jealous Kiwis to digi-visit. I think we have some, we've got some drone footage and we have some video footage. This is from, I think that we can make available, as I said, we will make available some film of the site. We also have drone footage if you want to make a drone flight to the area. So these all we can make available. And as for Reza, definitely we're putting the presentation up on we've already provided it to be put up on the site. And there will also, I believe, be a recording of the whole session up on the site from the 2nd.